Hi everyone and welcome to another little tutorial. This is all about upcycling and it's been inspired by this month's Graphic45 challenge as it happens, and they are asking you to upcycle using their papers. And this is also upcycling an idea because I originally did this way back in 2012. I've been back dusting off all the archives of my blog and I have found the original video cases. These are the ones that I'm going to show you how to make, and these are the ones that I made way back then. And you can see some of the gorgeous old papers that I've been using and used way back then. And it was actually a photograph tutorial that I showed you how to turn video cases into little mini albums. This time I used these to store some Tim Holtz stamps that I had, and you can see that you can really go to town and decorate these up. These have seen a bit better days and they are starting to come apart, so I'm going to show you a different way. Rather than using double-sided tape, which I did way back then, I'm going to be using glue to put these together, but the principles are the same, except I'm going to upcycle the photo tutorial for a video one, and I know that you're going to enjoy making these. Everybody's got these lying around and they make great storage. Because all of the cases vary slightly depending on where you've bought them from and what they've had in the way of videos inside, I'm not going to give you measurements, I'm just going to give you process. And I'm just looking at my mat here on the screen. It's all a little bit skew-iff, but never mind. You will be able to see what I'm doing. So you're looking for video cases that are in good condition. Most of them have got these little plastic covers where the content picture, I don't know what to call it, where it tells you what was inside the video, sits, little sleeves that you can just remove, use your craft knife and just gently slide it along and you can get rid of that piece of plastic. When choosing your video cases, do shut or open and close them a few times. Make sure that they don't get stuck, that they open and close nicely, particularly if you're going to store stuff inside them rather than a mini album. Not so important if it's a mini album because nothing's going to fall out. If you're going to change it into a mini album, you'll need one of these Tim Holtz little file mechanisms to go inside. This is the larger of the two that he does. You also want to make sure that it's all in good condition, because the last thing that you want to do is have cracks and things in the cases. So we can either turn this into a storage box or we can turn it into a mini album, and I'm sure there are lots of other ideas once that you have seen how this is done. Now you do get video covers in black and white and they are very, very useful. In fact, if I'd have had any, I probably would have used those myself, and I decided that I would have a go at painting these video cases. I'm not going to show you this all the way through because actually, would I recommend it if you're not too worried about it looking a bit shabby, because the paint does have a tendency to peel off, especially where you open and close the video cases along the spine of the video case itself, and you could quite easily scratch them and knock this paint off. I will tell you what I did because I was quite happy with how they turned out, and I'm quite happy to live with that and maybe just give them a little touch up every now and again if they get too worse for wear. So literally all I'm going to be doing is covering every area that I think of where you would normally ink or perhaps have a border. I'm not going to completely wrap this in paper. We're going to cover it in sections so the edges of the video case will show. So if you do decide to do exactly what I'm doing for these pieces that I'm going to show you, and you haven't got a black and white case that you could, or black or white case that you could use instead of painting, then just remember what I said. It's not going to be perfect and you will lose some of that paint along the way. If you had an enamel paint, that probably would work better. Perhaps you could spray these into the colours that you wanted. And I've got a feeling that that would work better. Alternatively, you can use alcohol ink or pro markers. So once I'd gone over all the areas that I thought would show once I covered this in paper, then I went over it again because it needed 2 coats to make sure it was nicely covered. So you can see here I've already started to cut some of the papers, so I'm going to talk you through exactly what you need to measure and exactly what we're going to cover to turn these into beautiful boxes. So that's what it looks like when it's all nice and dry and we're ready to start decorating. But also, as well as painting, because this isn't very robust, you might want to try to use perhaps pro markers or alcohol inks. So if you do want something a little bit more permanent, then I suggest alcohol ink is the way to go, and that's exactly how I covered these original video cases when I made them way back in 2012, and you can see it hasn't marked in any way. It's stood the test of time. But I think if you're going for the shabby chic look, it won't really matter if you lose a little bit of paint along the way. So the choice is yours, but you need to do that before you start decorating with your papers. So for this particular little video case, we're going to be making a mini album version, and I will show you a few other options at the end of the video. So you're going to be measuring your case as you go. I'm not going to give you the measurements because they can depend on how your video case is structured on the inside. Each of the closures you'll find are different from make to make, depending on who originally manufactured your video case. But I'll give you lots of pointers on what to look out for when you're measuring up. One in particular is where your video case closes. You will find that you'll have little pieces like this sticking out that might encroach on your paper. I'll show you a few tips on getting around that, but take the basic measurement to start with, and we're going to start working on the inside of the case first. I've already measured and cut my papers, and you can see actually I'm just trying to fit what I want on the outside and the inside. Now if I'd have been paying attention to myself, that's the right paper for the inside, and I've cut them to fit as near as possible. And because we've covered the edges with whatever you choose, whether it be paint or alcohol ink, you can see that it will still look nice because we've got that lovely white edge. Now I'm going to be using glue throughout this process because I found that the old video cases from 2012, although they've stood up to the test of time, I can see that that tape is starting to dry out. So I'm going to go with glue this time round. So make sure that the papers that you measure for the inside do not encroach on the actual spine of the video. And this is going to be a mini album, so that is going to sit on the inside. Because we're using brads to actually secure this into position, you're going to need to cover the inside of the box first. If you've got any edges that you want to ink, perhaps you're using something and you want to do black edges, Graphic 45, when you cut the papers you get a white edge, so at this stage before you stick it down I would ink the edges. Because mine are white and my edges are white, I don't need to do that. Now when you're adding your glue to your papers, make sure that you pay particular attention to the edges. They're the places where the paper is going to lift, and so you want to make sure that you get plenty of glue around those edges. Make sure that you've got it exactly where you want it and then give it a really good press down. So I do put a little bit of glue into the middle of the papers, but I'm not so bothered about that. It's those edges that you want to pay attention to. You don't want those to lift, so if you get those glued down well, then this is going to stand the test of time. And again, remembering, make sure that as you've measured your papers that you are not encroaching on that little fold area where the video closes. And then we're going to stick the spine piece into place. You can see already that this is starting to look really pretty. I'm just checking my closures here, making sure that everything is working, and then we can start to stick the front and back covers into position. So again, I've measured my paper, so I've got a little bit of a white border which adds to the design, and I'm making sure that those edges are glued down well. I'm going to leave the spine because we're going to put that little closure in first, the little file or page holding mechanism in first, and that's going to have brads, and then the outside piece of paper that covers the spine will cover up those workings. So covering the front and the back. Pay attention if your design's got a way up, that your video is the right way up. It doesn't make any difference to me on this one, but it did on a couple of others. So I had to be careful that things were up the right way. And now this is entirely optional. It depends what you're feeling like. You can cover the inside of the box or not. It's up to you. So I've measured the depth, again making sure that it completely avoids that top edge, and it's fitting in between any little bits of plastic that are poking out on the inside. Top and bottom is quite easy. So you can see I've still left that white edge. And then because of the mechanism, the way this video closes, I've got lots of little sections on mine. It's entirely up to you whether you feel that the need to cover these. You'll hardly see them once you're using this as a mini album, but I just wanted to show you everything that you could possibly do to cover your box and make it beautiful. But once you get to make these for yourself, you can decide whether it's worth the time and the trouble of just measuring those little pieces. I'm kind of trimming them as I go. It's a bit difficult to get them exactly right first time. Again, making sure if you are doing this that all your papers end up the right way around. So I've got some little tiny pieces to finish off the inside of the box. I don't know, I think it's worth the effort. Once it's finished, it's going to look gorgeous. So now we can add that mechanism, and as I said, this is a Tim Holtz product. They do a smaller one, but I found this big one works quite well. I think the sizing of these boxes are more or less the same, so just have a little play, try and close it with this more or less on its side. If you can close the box with it on its side, then you know the larger one's going to fit. If not, just change to the smaller one. So what you're going to do is mark the position of the brads, make sure that it's central top and bottom, and then using a pokey tool you're going to, and this does take a little bit of force to push through. You might be able to use a crocodile on this. I'm not sure. I didn't think to try it until I'm just watching this back. Make sure your fingers are well out of the way and just gradually push that through until you're sure that a brad will be able to go through those holes and secure this in position. I am going to add a little bit of hot glue just for extra security, but you do need to be careful of the mechanism itself, because if you add too much glue where the mechanism is, then you will find you cannot open and close those little rings. Ring binder, that's what I'm thinking of. It's a ring binding mechanism. So now I'm just having a little break while my hot glue gun gets hot, and I'm going to show you how to embellish a little strip of paper with some lace. So I've added some strong double-sided tape to the back of a border strip that I've cut from one of my papers, and then I'm just going along, and every half an inch or so I'm making a little pleat with this pretty lace all the way along this paper strip. So move about half an inch and then make another little pleat, half an inch and another little pleat all the way along the strip. Now this little idea is just purely and simply to show you what I did, but you could opt not to use any ribbons on your box when you decorate them. The decoration of these boxes is entirely up to you. If you do want to do this, don't forget you can do it with a nice soft ribbon such as an American seam binding, as well as little delicate laces. I wouldn't perhaps use a cotton lace for this because it's going to get a little bit bulky. So this is quite a delicate lace, so it works really well without adding too much bulk at the back of the paper strip. You can see I don't uncover all of that tape in one go because this is quite a strong double-sided tape. Your fingers really do stick as you work your way along the paper strip. You could just use ribbon to decorate the outside of your box, but I quite like using those border strips. I'm going to cover that up for now till I'm ready to use it, and you can see how pretty that will look on the video case. So now we're ready to add that ring binder mechanism. My glue gun is hot and ready to go. Okay, so you add some hot glue. This bit's entirely up to you. I just felt it made things a little bit more secure, getting my hot glue everywhere. And then pushing it into place, and whilst it's cooling off and setting, I'm just opening and closing that ring binder mechanism, making sure that everything works. And then it's time to add those brads. And this is where I lost one of my brads. I think this jumper's quite fluffy that I'm wearing. I might have just swept it onto the floor. So I quickly ran off to find another brad. You can see me looking for it here. And back again. Good job I had two. And I've just picked a colour that coordinates with the design of this particular video. Again, the hole wasn't quite big enough, just making it slightly bigger, and then we can open out those brads and press them down really well, and this will hold your mechanism in place. And then just before you start to decorate it any further, make sure that everything closes up and that is going to sit nicely on the inside of your video box. And I thought I was being super organised and had cut all of my pieces, but I'd forgotten about the outside of the box itself. And as I'm doing this, I'm thinking actually it would be quite fun to make it look like a book again, and you could actually cover this part of your book to look like the pages of a book. So that's another idea that's entirely up to you. So I'm just measuring again and cutting these strips. So I'm using the same paper that I used on the inside of the box, just to add some contrast along the, let's call it the gussets of the video case itself. You can see I'm really using up my scraps here and making sure that I get nice little paper strips to cover the edges of my video. So when you're covering the actual spine of your video, the piece that you'll be able to see when these are standing or sitting on your shelves, you want to think about the fact that you want to know what's in the box. So you're going to add a label to the spine. I know that I'm going to wrap a ribbon round the bottom of my box, and my spine is going to sit and cover the mechanism if you're turning this into a mini album. You don't need to think about this if you're turning it into a box, but I'll talk to you more about that later on. So this next step is optional. It depends whether you want some little charms dangling off the top of the spine of your book. If you do, add a little brad at this point. That's where we're going to tie those charms to, and then glue down in the same way. Make sure this really is stuck down well, because you've got the lumps and bumps of the brads. Just pay a little bit of attention to pushing this down while the glue is drying. If you don't want any charms coming off the top of your box, then you don't need to add that little brad at the top. Again, making sure your box is the right way around and that the brad is at the top and not at the bottom. Now remember I said one of the boxes broke while I was doing this. This is that particular box, and I'm just going to be using it as a paint palette right now. And this is another tip for, because I want this to look a little bit shabby, I'm going to go all the way around the edges. I've got this really scruffy brush that I'm just loading with a tiny bit of paint and dragging it down the edges, a bit like you would if you were inking. And this really does then blend in that white edge to the papers, makes it all really look like it was meant to be. It adds to the fact that this is quite a beachy theme. It's got a little shabby chic look going on. And another benefit of doing this is that if I do lose any paint in the future, once I'm using these as storage or mini albums, then it wouldn't take me too long just to do this little technique again and cover up any little losses of paint that I might have. So remember what I said, the choice is yours. Depends how bothered you are about losing the odd bit of paint, whether you would use this technique or whether you're going to opt for the more permanent and easy aftercare effect by using alcohol inks to cover those edges. And once I've been around the front and the back, I'm also going to add a little bit, trying to not perhaps be quite so heavy-handed on the spine area, and just giving it a little of that same treatment. Once that's drying, I'm going to talk to you about how to decorate these boxes and how to finish them off if you want to make a mini album or if you want to turn it into storage. So mini album first. I've taken advantage of all these gorgeous cut apart pages that come in the collections, and I'm going to use this as my page. I'm thinking of this as a seaside album once it's finished. Now if you want to add a title, you could always add a piece of card to the center of this, but I'm going to keep her exactly as she is, and she's going to sit on the front of my box. Now had I had any glossy accents in stock, I would have actually glossy accented this center section. The title for this mini album will be on the side, so I'm going to keep that gorgeous picture on the front. So I'm cutting my pages to fit on the inside. Again, you'll have to double check these measurements, but I'm going to give you them so you know exactly what I'm doing, and you'll be able to adapt them if you need to slightly adjust the width or the height of the pages. You can see I'm going to be using some more of these cut apart elements to decorate the cover and also to pop on the inside of the cover, which you'll see me do later on. And I've already cut my pages. So I'm going to give you some measurements. The pages themselves measure 7 inches by 6 inches, and the 6 inches is the width measurement. And you'll see what we're going to do about the fact they're too big, as you can see, to fit on the inside of the box. And I've got 2 pages out of each sheet, and I'm going to have 6 pages and a cover, and you'll see why as we put this in. I would start with 6, and if you want to add any more and you've got room to add any more, then you can. You don't have to do your pages in this style. This is just a suggestion. You could keep them plain, in which case you'd probably be able to fit more pages inside your album. So for each of my pages, with the page in the, we're going to call it the portrait position, so the long edge is up and down, which is a 7-inch measurement, and the 6-inch measurement is across, and then we're going to score it at the 4-inch mark. Things are getting a bit messy here, lost my bone folder. And I'm going to score down each of the pages at this point. Again, paying attention if you've got any patterns that need to be up in a certain direction. This little flap needs to be on the left, the right hand side of your page as you look at your book. Not the left, the right. You can see me holding my hands up here, where you would if you could see me. And we're also going to add little spots for journaling on this little fold over section. So I've cut these to allow a little border of that paper all the way around. So this measures 1 3/4 by 6 3/4, and you'll need 2 of these for each of your pages. These are intended as journaling spots. If you're not into journaling, you could use this little flap to add little tiny photos or embellishments if you wanted to. Hence the reason for sticking with the 6 pages at this point. As we add these elements and add our photographs, add any framing that we want to do, it will make these little mini albums bulk up, and we still need to be able to close that video case when we're finished. So be a little bit careful. Start with less pages and add more if you can fit them in. So I'm trying to give you lots and lots of ideas. For instance, you don't have to have this flap, you can have plain pages. You don't have to have any journaling spots, you don't have to have any embellishments, you can keep it plain and simple, or you can do what I'm doing here and going to town and using up all of your lovely Graphic 45 scraps in order to decorate this mini album. So this will be the journaling spot for the page when it's open, and then when you turn over your page, you've got the journaling for the other side. The other thing that I'm going to do is to add frames. Now these actually will be where the photographs sit once you put this together, and I'm really mixing and matching up the designs, and again, this is entirely optional. You can just put your photograph in the middle of this page, leave a border all the way around the edge, and your photo will be framed anyway. But I'm just going to go to town, and it just shows you where a photograph will sit. You can see here what the finished page looks like. So first of all, you're going to, before you start sticking those frames into place, you want to put the holes in for your ring mechanism. So I measured out my first page and made sure that they were in the right place. Now you could do this with a spare scrap of paper if you're tight on your Graphic 45, or you don't want to waste your Graphic 45, more to the point. And once you've got your template, you can do as I'm doing here, put one on top of the other and punch. Use it as a guide to punch the rest of your pages. Now I do love my crocodile, but one bugbear that really does get on your nerves when you've got your hands full and you're trying to get the project punched is the fact that those little drop bits that you cut away stick inside, and if you want to see where you're punching, you've got to poke them out each time. So our pages have got the journaling spots in place, we've punched them, and now we're going to add those little frames. So each of my coordinating frames measure 3 inches by 6 inches, and then I'm centering them on the page. So my photographs will measure slightly smaller than 3 inches by 6 inches, and that will just leave a little tiny peak of that paper underneath. So like I said, this is entirely up to you. If you don't want the frames, you're happy with the papers and then the photographs. Imagine these little papers that I'm sticking on now are photographs, and then that's a job done. If you're using other papers and you want to ink edges, that's something else you can think about. I'm just having a real good old think about which papers I want to put where, and that's the fun of working with gorgeous coordinating patterns. You can choose which you want to coordinate with what. So we've got photo frames in place, we've got journaling pieces in place, and now I wanted to add just a little bit of a decorative touch. I love these little sort of stamp pieces that were on one of the cut apart pages. It was the one that has borders and things on, and I'm going to add that as a little lift tab on each of those fold out sections. So I've cut out 2 for each page, and there was plenty in my little pad of papers, and then I'm just sticking one behind the other, and you can see I've just used some fancy scissors to make this look like a little stamp. And each time I add this, I'm using the previous page just to make sure they're all in exactly the same place. So my 6 pages are done, and I'm ready to make the cover. So some more of those cut apart elements. This will work perfectly for just adding a little bit of journaling into the front of the album, perhaps describing what is going on in the contents of the little mini album. And just because I can, I'm going to add another little one all about the sea to the back of the little mini album. You can see how gorgeous this is looking already. It's so easy with the Graphic 45 papers to mix and match things and come up with beautiful projects each and every time. So this is what a single page would look like if you were making this. So this would be 7 by 4 inches. If you didn't want the little lift out journaling flap or extra space for photographs, you could put small photographs on this rather than journaling if you wanted to. then that would be your measurement. So just check your measurements fit in your particular video case. And you can see I've had a little bit of lace to the top and the bottom of this Take Me to the Sea paper, and I'm adding it to the page, and I've got another little, just because it encroaches on the holes, I need to re-punch those. And then I'm adding this second element to the back of the cover. Now I didn't go and add a chipboard cover because it just adds too much bulk and you haven't got a huge amount of room on the inside of this. So I'm happy with this being decorated up like a cover, but I don't need it to be any thicker than the pages that are underneath. I've not quite got that in the right place. So almost at the end, we have a little cover to our album and all of the pages inside. Everything closes and we're ready to finish the decoration of the front of the album. So as I said before, I've used these little cut apart elements on each of my boxes, which I will show you in just a moment, and I will glossy accent that central panel later on. I'm not going to add the title to the front of the cover because I know it's going to be on the spine. And here's that gorgeous trim that we prepared earlier. So removing that cover to the double-sided tape, and I am going to stick another piece on top of this just to cover up the edges of the lace. Make sure that they don't pull away once this is in position, just to be doubly secure really. And then starting at one edge, wrapping around the spine and then trimming it to length on the other side. You can see how pretty that's looking already. Now I want to add my little piece for the title of this mini album when it has one, like, I don't know, holiday in, let me go somewhere exotic like Mauritius or the Seychelles one day. Or maybe just on Brighton Beach. There we go. So you can see what I'm doing. Again, I'm not going to give you measurements. I'm adding a little frame for contrast and then a piece of plain paper so that I can write the title on when I know what's going in this little mini album. And you'll see on the other projects that I've actually stamped up because they've got contents in rather than mini albums. I knew what was going in them, and I'll show you those in just a second. I decided to raise this off the spine a little bit, so I've used foam pads, and then we can add our charms. So if you've decided that you're going to add charms, you're going to take a length of thread. This is just an embroidery thread. It could be a string or even a fine ribbon really. I'm wrapping it around the brad, and do that a couple of times to make sure it's secure, and then tie on your charms. And I'm doing mine at two different lengths. So I've got one that's sort of sitting just above that little file label. I'm tying 3 little knots, and then top tip is to add a little bit of glue. Make sure the glue is the glue is one that dries clear, and it will hold that knot nice and secure, won't let the thread slip and open up. And then I'm going to tie this second one a little bit shorter. So I've picked little charms that go with my papers. So this Voyage Beneath the Sea paper is obviously themed with the ocean. I could have used cogs actually because I've got a little bit of a steampunk vibe going on, but I'm going with the seaside elements, and I've got a little shell charm and a little starfish. You can see how pretty that looks. How gorgeous is that going to look on your shelf? And it hides a lovely little mini album within. So that's the first part complete on showing you how to upcycle your video cases, and you can see that that is working really well. The next one is to show you how to turn them into little storage boxes. So I followed the same pattern as you can see here. This time I have added a little section at the back to turn it into a box, and I can keep these little seashells inside. So they all look lovely when they're stacked up together, and this is another one, again using more of those gorgeous graphic 45 papers but following the same theme, so it really does look nice when they are all put together. This one was slightly different. You can see I've had to use 2 strips in order to cover that little gusset part, and I've got all these gorgeous little pink petals inside. And these were actually a carnation silk flower, or a set of silk flowers that I've taken apart, and I'm going to be using them on a project in the future. So not suitable for really teeny tiny elements, but definitely suitable for storage. And last but not least, I've got my little Halloween version, and this is the one that I'm going to show you how to turn this into a box. So all of the other techniques that I've shown you I've done. I've got ribbon this time. I've covered that centre section, or used the centre section to stamp the contents of the box on. I've got my little Halloween charms. I don't want to turn up the right way. There we go. And those little extra decorations on the front, and then inside I'm going to be showing you how to turn this into a box. So I've been covering the inside in exactly the same way, and when I'm coming to working on the little chipboard section that will turn it into a box, you can use, or you can cover the spine at this point. I'm not quite sure why I held on to this. Didn't really need to. I could have shown you that done. And you can see I've got a little extra piece in the centre there. I'm just pressing the papers around that. You'll find all sorts of little odd bits. You can see the closure of this one is slightly different, but I've covered it with paper anyway. And I've measured from the 2 side points, and most of these videos have got a little lip here. Now you can either stick to the inside or the outside. I'm going for the outside on this one, and I've cut my piece of chipboard to fit snugly between those 2 points, and I've also made sure that the height is just slightly less than the edge of the video box. That way there'll be no encroachment when I close this, but I've really made sure it's only a little bit less because we don't want our elements falling out of the box. So the paper that I've cut is double the height or the width of the chipboard, and then a little bit extra, about 1/4 of an inch extra, and you'll see why as I start to wrap this. So I'm sticking the paper to one side. Be careful and let that grab before you start to fold this over, or you might find there's a little bit of movement. Fold that snugly across the top and glue again. And you can see I did have a little bit of movement, so I'm just fiddling with that to make that better again. So just give it a second or two for the glue to set before you start to fold that over, because you want it nice and tight. And then fold that into position and add glue. Mostly to your craft mat. There we go. And then just fold that. You can see I've got about 1/4 of an inch there, and it's just a little bit too much, so I'm just trimming that down with my craft knife. So it's all right to cut them slightly bigger and then trim it down so it's nice and neat once you've wrapped the piece of card. So I'm folding it around to start with just to get my fold, and then I'm flipping it back in the opposite direction. So creating a little L shape with my closure to the box, and because this is black paper and sometimes when you fold Graphic 45 or cut Graphic 45 you reveal that inner core which is white, so I'm just getting rid of that with a little bit of black ink. And then we're adding our glue to the little tab that we've created at the bottom of what will become one of the sides of the box. And you will have to trim this a little bit as you pop it in. I always forget this section, you'll see me forget it again. And you're adding some glue where the side of, or this little strip of card touches those two little plastic sections on the edge of the box, and just for good measure add a little bit of glue to each of the chipboard ends. Then we can pop that into position, and it's here that I always realise the paper is going to be in the way at that very edge. So just tab the paper strip by just cutting off a little triangle at each edge, and that way it won't, or it will sit nicely next to those little plastic lips or tags on the side of the box, and then you can sit that into position. Really press well against those little plastic pieces, so making sure that the edge of the box joins to that, and press down well on the paper which joins the little edge of the box to the bottom of the box. So now we have got a four-sided box where we can add our little, in this case, going to be Halloween embellishments. So I've got some ribbons and a sparkly spider, a Halloween title, some little bits of tinsel and bandage and charms, and what else can I fit in here? I've got some rats, that's what I've got. Who would ever suspect that you've got rats inside your Graphic 45 video cases? And even some skulls on chains. So you can see I have got lots of goodies inside these storage boxes, so they are useful as well as gorgeous. I'm not going to put these little Halloween bones, they're actually not Halloween bones, they're wish bones, so I'm going to keep those out with my other Tim Holtz embellishments, but all of this Halloween stuff is going to go in here, and it will be all kept together when I am ready to use them next time. And how fabulous is this going to look on my shelves? We all need storage, and this upcycling idea from way back in 2012, I know you're going to love making these. They're easy to make and they are really useful, whether you decide to make storage boxes or little mini albums. Mini albums would make lovely gifts. You could make them and give them to people to put jewellery in. Who would ever know what was inside if you didn't actually say on the spine? They just look like gorgeous little boxes. And here's that original idea. You could even store your stamps inside. I just added acetate pages as well as card pages, and then I can stick my stamps somewhere nice and safe. And I really hope that you have enjoyed seeing how easy it is to do this, and what a fun way to make storage and use up your gorgeous Graphic 45 papers. Of course you can do this with other papers, but I'm showing you how all those gorgeous coordinated patterns of Graphic 45, all those cut apart elements are perfect to use with these video boxes to make storage, or as you have here on this final piece, a gorgeous mini album within. And before I go, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone that's stopped by and wished me luck on my Graphic 45 audition. I am through to the second round and I have to post my tutorial by the 17th of April, and then we hear the final result on the 25th of April. So still keep everything crossed for me except for when you're crafting, and I will see you again soon with that piece. So until then, have fun creating these video boxes. Don't forget to share this with your friend and subscribe if you're new around here, and keep abreast of all the creativity that goes on this video channel. Until next time, thank you for watching. So if you love Graphic 45, why not check out my Graphic 45 playlist by clicking on the I card above, or check out my YouTube channel and find it there. Lots of ideas for using up your Graphic 45 gorgeous papers, including a tour of this piece that I made for a Graphic 45 audition a few years ago now. I didn't get through, but I will keep trying, and you'll find lots of Graphic 45 goodness on this playlist.